Welcome back or welcome to Grateful and Full of Greatness. I'm your host, Mark Lassini. On this podcast, I sit down with guests who, in my opinion, live their lives with the pursuit of greatness in mind. This platform allows me to discuss and explain the strategies that go into reaching peak performance. This is episode number 48. My guest is a woman who has dedicated her life to helping women succeed in their professional and personal lives, Monique de Maio. Born in France, Monique immigrated to the United States at 5 years old. Navigating a new country, culture, and language, Monique worked her way up from IBM to Wall Street in various marketing roles to being a magazine publisher to finally running her own successful business. I look forward to hearing how these experiences led to her to write a book, The 7 Secrets to Creating a Life You Love, a practical guide for women in leadership. She is also the creator of her own podcast called Possibilities, which can be found on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, which I will include in the show notes. Monique is the founder and CMO of her company, onDemandCMO, a marketing consultancy that provides insightful and impactful marketing strategies to help brands and businesses flourish. An absolute trailblazer, forever student, storyteller, and leader, Monique's energy is one of a kind. I'm thrilled for her to share her work, philosophy, and perspectives with this community. Monique, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Mark. Takes one to know one, my friend. Takes one to know one. We're going to have fun today.
That's right. In your marketing messages and videos that I love that you produce on LinkedIn and other platforms, clarity is a word that comes to mind. You seem to know who you are, what you want to say, and how to deliver that message effectively. Was that always true? Is that true to say? And have you always been like that?
Wow, that's a lot of questions to unpack. We'll take one at a little bit at a time. So simplicity and clarity is what I figured out very recently is a superpower that I didn't know was a superpower, and I took for granted for a long time because I like to take complicated things and break them down and make them simple. So very approachable. So the funny thing is when we work with tech services and professional services and financial services clients who have kind of a complicated, story and product or services to sell, I'm like, oh yeah. So what you really mean is that you do X, Y, and Z, right? And they look at me and they go, yeah, how'd you get that? Well, because that's what you do. It's so simple, right? And the people will be around a conference table debating like what they do, and they use 27 million words to describe it. I'm like, no, you have 2 seconds to explain. So this is what you really do. So that clarity thing was not in my awareness until I became a certified why coach. So the Why Institute allows you to do your own self-assessment. And it came up that like I have a contribute why. That's my purpose in life. The why I get out of bed is I want to contribute to everything I can. It's literally I can't help myself. If you ask me a question, I want to make this podcast better, I'll send you back like blah, blah, and then you say, I want to cure for my cholesterol, but I don't want to use drugs. Do you have a supplement that you'd recommend? I can't help myself, so I do that. To answer the previous question, did I always know it? No. Was I always very clear about who I was? No, I was very clear who I didn't want to be. That I can tell you from a very young age. I didn't want to be the assholes, excuse my French, that I encountered growing up, that were completely rude and mean to me as a result of being different, right? So I grew up with that, and I decided there was no way I would ever be one of those mean people or bullies or unempathetic people. And I needed to be as good, if not better, than those who brought me down, who were trying to bring me down as a result of trying to get out of that situation. So if you were gonna be that person, I was gonna meet you where you are, and then I was gonna best you. And that didn't stop until literally I got my black belt in martial arts at the age of 47.
Well, I knew this was going to happen. You had a lot to unpack in my first question, and now I have a lot to unpack in your answer. And I will say this about the contribution side. I kind of had 2 questions, but before I get to the second, I want to ask you this. When we first met, and we sat down, and you helped me like you did for that company. Oh, you really do one and two things. You showed me the vision and you helped me get clarity on that vision. And then I'm going to use your vernacular where you say, let's back the truck up and reverse engineer it. And I want to do that in this
Love it.
podcast, because on the clarity is one thing, but how I like to start everything is the earliest influences and upbringing, right? Because that's really what
Yeah.
allows you to separate the wheat from the chaff, knowing who you don't want to be and all that. So that's the specific question: is who were your earliest influences that really come to mind that impacted you early on?
My dad, I would say. Definitely my dad. So I tell a story in the book about I'm in third grade. No, I tell a couple stories. So one is I'm in third grade, and we're doing an arts and crafts project, and the room smells like crayons and glue, and I'm making fake nails and showing my friends that my fake nails are so cute with my new construction paper. And all of a sudden I find myself on the floor smelling linoleum bleach because I just got punched in the face by the class bully. What? What's happening here? And teacher steps out and goes to get supplies, and the entire class is around Joey and me. And I'm having an out-of-body experience, and I'm laying on the floor and I'm smelling bleach. I'm like, I got to get up. I got to hit this guy back. I'm going to get up and hit him back. And like I had an out-of-body experience, I feel my right arm just go way back in. Boom! Like as hard as I could. I smacked this kid. I punched this kid back in the face. And the look of surprise on his face, I can still see today. And I was like, I'm not taking this shit anymore. I'm not taking it. And teacher comes back in the room. It's like, what happened? Joey punched Monique in the face. He gets sent down to the principal's office. I get sent down to the nurse. And no one ever asked me how I was again. Now, I have a shiner at this point. I have to go home and explain the shiner. And this is what happens. My mother doesn't notice it. I'm not sure how, why, where. Maybe she was, I don't know. But I have to sit down to dinner. And my dad immediately says, what happened to you? And I say nothing, because I know my parents have other things to worry about other than me. And he's like, nothing, huh? Nothing. Really? Does the other guy look like you? Yup. Okay, then let's eat. That's it.
Oh, birds of a feather there. And I will say, going in that, right, from the color on your face and the shiner, was something my mentor says to me, Doc Gilbert, your pain becomes your purpose. And I think that's going to become a theme inside of this, right? So going from the earliest influences to how that resonates with you. You talked about that, right? Not only just the shiner, but these early influences that you had to overcome. Could you shed a little bit more light on that, right?
Sure.
How that was for you as an immigrant coming to America and
Sure.
adjusting.
Yeah, it was pretty brutal. So I'm 59 today, this year. So that means that was 54 years ago. And 54 years ago, the United States did not have things like English as a second language. They did not have things like early intervention. They didn't have things like class for kids on the spectrum. The spectrum, first of all, didn't exist like it existed today. Back in those days, you had one kid out of 5,000 or something like that be on the autism spectrum. Today, if you're a boy in New Jersey, you have a 1 in somewhere between 25 and 45 person chance of being on the spectrum. It's pretty crazy. That's the toxicity of our environment. Anyway, the point is that in elementary schools, they didn't have these classes, these specialty classes of any sort. So my mom brings me into elementary school, and I'm about to go into kindergarten, and she doesn't speak any English. So she drops me off with the the principal, and the principal says, now, meanwhile, I'm holding a stack of papers. My mother has said bye. She's shook her hand. She gives me a kiss, and she leaves. And this woman, all women, we're down a big long corridor, asked me what my name is. And I'm thinking, well, I know that my mom sat with my aunt to fill out these papers, and my name is all over the place. But she's like, what's your name? And I say, Monique. And she says, well, that's an interesting name. why don't maybe we can call you Momo or Mo or Nikki or Nikki. And I just look at her like, what's wrong with Monique? And then I go home that day and cry that I need to change my name because nobody can say it. You've got to be kidding me. Monique is not that hard. So then she leaves me in this class where all of the students in the class have some disability or another, physical, emotional, intellectual, cognitive, all of it. And there it is. So I am a neurotypical child, but I'm in a class with kids with disabilities. Nothing wrong with having a disability. It just so happens that I don't have one. I didn't have one. And I needed to be put with the neurotypical kids. I just didn't speak the language. So you left me in a class where I can't even relate to those kids for very different reasons than I can't relate to the kids down the hall because they don't speak. And meanwhile, I can speak some, I can get by, but the point is you've already classified me in a place that doesn't fit. So that was my entry point.
Well, I'll say very spiritually, one of the things that I love is that the stone that gets rejected becomes the cornerstone. And I think in a lot of these podcasts that I've done, I found that the people that I talk to, right, they have some sort of painful thing that was basically rocket fuel for them to do something great.
Correct.
And I guess the next step would be you're going through hardship after hardship, from Shiner to Monique is not the name we're going to call you. When did you break through the light? Did it take years?
Yeah, it did. Definitely. I always had, so from that point on, from that to something else, to taking, having to be the interpreter for my family. Like I tell another story about, returning the broken TV to Gimbals because my parents couldn't communicate. And I did that, and I'm 5 years old, and I'm communicating with a guy that's like, in my mind is the Jolly Green Giant. He's 6 foot something, and I'm this puny little thing. I'm small to begin with today, but imagine what I look like as a 5-year-old, So I was like this cute little thing with ringlets and a white bow on my head. And I knew that I inherently had two things going on. I had to take care of myself, and I also had to take care of my family because they couldn't. So this sort of chip on my shoulder lasted literally for years. Like if somebody looked at me sideways, somebody wanted to fight, I was all about the fight. Like, you bring it. Like, I was all about the fight because I had it and I wasn't taking it. So until I realized that I didn't need to fight, I did. I was ready to. And then when I could fight, like when I got my black belt and I really could take somebody on and hurt them or defend myself with skill, I didn't feel the need to anymore. And that was the what's the word, when if not the therapy, but maybe it was therapeutic. It was just like, I don't need to do this anymore. I don't have anything to prove anymore. I'm okay. It's going to be fine. No one's out to get me. No one's going to hit me. No one's going to do anything. And if they do, I got it.
You got it.
It's okay.
Right.
And that's pretty old. So,
well, I'll say it takes, you have to be able to fight and then be able to control it in order to have that kind of calm and peace that you're feeling. And whether this translates into being prepared in the business world or athletics or otherwise, the confidence, maybe that's the word, right? The trust in your abilities comes from being prepared. And then you have to figure out whether you want to use it. We will get into the book in depth, but I love your first part of it, which is the authentic voice. When did you find that voice?
I think just about that, around that time frame. I think I was definitely in my 40s when I kind of got a handle on what I was and was not going to be, or to stand for, or to to represent to the outer world, and for myself. And I think I honed it in my 40s, and then in my 50s, I feel like I really got into myself and very much actualized. I'm like the happiest I've ever been. I am absolutely at peace and just super thrilled to be on the planet and just contributing. And, life is good. And it wasn't always, but I can't say enough nice things about the 50s. They're great. People are like, oh, I can't believe I'm 50. I'm like, God, congratulations. I'm so excited. I don't know what 60s are going to bring, but you know what? I'm not unhappy about it, because I know that it's a progressive enhancement for as far as I can tell.
Right.
I'll have to talk to your dad. He's a couple of years older than me, but no.
So, and for those listening, that's how we met, through my
Yeah,
father, who couldn't
so
have
cute.
had nicer things to say, and then there's been flourishing ever since. And so, let's go to the next chapter, the next epoch, right, where you now are maybe a teen or young 20, right, making your way
Mm.
into the world. Talk to me about that stage where
Oof.
now you've got that you still have that edge because you said it took a while for you to hone
Oh
that
yeah.
in, right?
Hmm.
But there was definitely a maturation that was going on, right?
Sure.
So how'd you step into that stage?
Well, it's really funny because my 20s was all about being discriminated against as a woman. So a lot of women
Mm,
listening to this can relate to this because I was, I went through the corporate environment and, things that today would be completely unheard of, like being propositioned by, a guy that you don't report to, but he's older than you and he's got seniority and, and he's like literally asking you to sleep with him. And this has happened all the time to female, friends of mine and colleagues. Or then it was when I had my dream job at the Adweek magazines and I was publisher. I was the only one on the executive team, on the leadership team. And it was I asked my boss back in the day to work one day a week from home, one day a week. And it wasn't like I wanted to any specific day. I said, you can pick, it doesn't matter to me, whatever you want. And he said, no. I said, what do you mean no? I said, I run a sales organization that is all over the country. These people are not necessarily right in front of me. And our numbers are 45% up on my clock. What is the situation?
mm,
Well, I need you to hold down the fort. I go, what do you mean hold down the fort? Yeah, you mean you hold down the fort while you play golf with our clients every Friday in the warm months. Ah, I see. So you want me to be the executive on duty while you go play with clients and I don't get to play. Okay.
mm.
Things like that all day long, every day, all day long. Okay. So you know what? If you want to propagate this old boys club, I'm good. I don't have to be here for this. And it was
Mm.
sad, but I left because it wasn't a tenable situation. You weren't respecting who I was. You weren't treating me fairly or equally. How about just equally? And, you know, life's too short.
I got two
And I'll tell
questions
you,
that come
it's
from that.
so good because it's been 25 years that I've had this business. And I can't tell you how excited I am to have not subjected myself to that crap for more years than I needed to.
Two parts, right?
Mm,
You're part of the leadership team. But my first question would be, what tangibles or intangibles to the people listening do you feel led into you being and holding that position on the leadership team? And then
mm,
my second question would be, so you left, right? And it's not easy for people to leave bad situations. It's very, very hard, right? You
yeah.
have to cultivate leverage in your CV and all these different things. So maybe you can talk about how you were able to separate and start that next chapter.
Sure. So I was originally a client of the magazine, and I had created the first lead generation campaign through the magazine that was very successful, and I had documented it. So, being a very data driven person, I was able to show that there was a lift in my conference, awareness and attendance using the magazine as a conduit. And I had worked with the previous publisher who was retiring because he was going to go be an author. And the guy that I was replacing was like in his 50s, smoked a pipe, had gray hair, like couldn't be any different than me if you put two humans together on a on a comparative basis. And then when they put out I had breakfast with the group publisher and the CEO, and then they asked me the trick question, right? I was working for a trade association. My boss and I were invited to this breakfast. And they said, well, if you know anybody who would know the business well, and especially we're trying to build out the marketing services side of it, which is the marketing side, and we're looking for a new publisher, let me know. And my boss and I are in the cab back to our office in the city, and he looks at me, he goes, oh my god, they need you. It's you that they need. You're going to
Mm.
go for this job, aren't you? And I said, do I have your blessing? And he says, absolutely. So then when I interviewed, I was interviewing against, other people in the industry. Some had more publishing, most didn't have marketing services like I did. And I had just gotten my MBA. It took me 3.5 years to go to school at night while I had a full-time job. And I finished my MBA in marketing at Fordham in the Lincoln Center city. And the guy that interviewed me said, well, and he gave me an assessment test, which was a predictive index at the time, which was totally ahead of the time. So he was a very big believer in the predictive index, as am I. Very similar in some ways to the why, but we'll talk about that separately. And he basically said to me, he goes, look, for the same amount of money, I can get a marketing services person who knows the business and has an MBA, or get somebody who's doing the same job and been doing the same job for 10, 15 years that may not bring me any new thinking. Why would I not go with you and take a chance? I was like, oh, thanks for letting me know why you hired me, because I'm cheap. I got it because I'm a girl and I've got an MBA, and you're willing to pay that guy the same amount of money you're willing to pay me, but I have better credentials. Okay, thank you for that. And in those days, you say, thank you, may I have another? And there it is.
And then how were you able to separate? What was the procedure that you took to be able to, obviously, because many people would call that courageous, and it is, but it's one thing to have courage.
Because I know nothing about publishing. I knew nothing about publishing. I knew everything
Hmm.
about marketing, but I knew nothing about publishing. So I created a marketing plan and submitted it to the people that were interviewing me. And I said, look, if I was running your magazine, this is what I would do. And this is what the implementation steps are. Take it or leave it. And that was obviously what did it for them. In addition to getting a better qualified person for less money. Yay!
Well, I think that takes us all the way to the end, because implementation is a big part of how you finish a book. Is that a strength for you in implementation,
definitely,
or is it something you've always had to work on?
No,
There's somebody
I think
who, yeah.
No, sorry, go
There's
ahead.
somebody that wants to work. There's somebody that wants to work on that in the implementation side of things, because it's much. I guess where I'm going with this is many people have dreams. Everybody does, and a fewer amount have goals, right? But implementing them, right, and creating an action plan around that is a totally different thing.
Yeah. So to get back to your original conversation about like what, after taking the flyer and starting my own business was not easy. I had a choice. I could go into publishing, and I was getting offers for getting interviews for like director of marketing and publishers, because I had both sides of sales and marketing abilities and backgrounds. So I was getting interest on both sides, but I really realized that I really wanted to be present for my now baby daughter, and I wanted to be a little bit more in control of my destiny. And so the choice that we made for the ability for me to take that flyer is that my husband and I always lived well below our means. So we always consciously, intentionally did not spend the money that we were told we could by the banks, by the pundits, whatever it was. While our friends were buying second homes, we never did. While some people bought designer clothes and shoes and handbags and whatever, I didn't. While we were told we were pre-approved for a ridiculous amount of money, we spent half of it. So our ability to have flexibility and fail was built into our system. So even if I started the company, and I had some really rough years in the beginning because there wasn't predictable income, right? So it would go like this. It was very much peaks and valleys, peaks and valleys. The thing that took away the most of the stress, and my husband was working corporate jobs, but unfortunately corporate America in those days was not as secure as we would have liked it to be. Downsize, mergers, acquisitions. He was let go a couple of times when we didn't expect it. So thankfully, when you build your life not on what you make, but on what it is that you want to spend, you have intentionality around it. You can make better and more flexible and more real-time choices and pivots that allow you to have what we now call in the trades FU money. So I never felt the need to, well, in the beginning I did, but eventually, you make smarter decisions about your life holistically. To answer your question about implementation, I find people who talk about things incessantly and do nothing with it incredibly frustrating. So my whole thing is just do it. Just try it. just do it. Just try it. If I hear you complain about, so as in our friend group, if you're complaining about the same thing more than twice, or more than 2 months in a row, or more than 2 years in a row, I got no use for that.
Mm.
I have to tell you, you have to either step in or step out, but like make a decision and do something, because without action, nothing happens. And I will repeat that. Without action, nothing happens. So best dreams, best plans, I don't care what you dreams, those are all words. Those are nothing. If you don't put in place some level of implementation or some action, nothing will change, nothing will happen, and you will continue to talk about the same goddamn thing. Sorry. I'm a little
Well, I
passionate
think
about that.
no, I said it at the top, Monique, that your energy is one of a kind. And I don't know if you're doing this intentionally or this goes to show how your 7 steps is so authentic to your identity, because the second epoch of your book is about choices, right?
Yes.
And whether we're trying to do that or not, we're going from authentic voice and you finding it, right, to implementation, and then up to choices, right? I
Yeah.
think the thing that comes to mind that I thought was a phenomenal book was, it's called The Catalyst by Jonah Berger. And for the very first time, it was less about taking more action, and it was more about, here are 5 barriers to action, and if you can reduce them and get them
Yes.
out of your way, you'll
Right.
have more action. And number 2 in that book has to do with the cost of inaction. And not enough people do that, right? Not enough people go,
Yeah.
if I'm still here 2 months, 2 years, 20 years from now, my soul will be ruined, right? And you
That's
really
right.
have to look at it like that, because it is very scary to leave something, but it's a totally different beast to be able to walk away. Now, you said it as a trailing thought, but it's one of the things you're most proud of, right? Your children, right? That are guiding lights and bright lights in your life. So let's go inside of that chapter, right? Where
Sure.
you've separated and took that leap, right? You've started your own marketing firm. Is that fair to
Yeah.
say, when when
Yeah.
you had your daughter? And then what was that chapter like, right?
Yeah.
Because
So, yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Good. No, you finish. Sorry.
Well, I was going to finish by saying that what I did like was that inside of the malice and the ignorance and the things that you had to deal with and go through, there was an individual there that empowered you and said, go for it. I do like that part where it was like, go for that role. Right. And I don't want to mix 2 questions, but I want to ask you about that epoch of your life where you did have your daughter, because I know it's something you're most proud of, but your dad was your first and earliest influence that you talked
Yeah.
about.
I
Who
think so.
then, in your 20s and 30s or in that part of your life, became a role model or somebody that really mentored you through that time?
Yeah. So I think for me, I had a super supporter and a super fan in Steve, my husband, which I'm very fortunate to still
Amazing.
be married to and love dearly. And I think until she passed, which was really sad, when I went to Solomon Brothers, and I had a great career in event marketing initially. My mentor there, Sophie Lantieri, who I loved to pieces, she passed very sadly from cancer about a year or so after I left the company, and that was really awful. But I didn't have mentors really, by and large. And that was one of the reasons, the impetus for me to create the book was, I want to kind of
Mm,
fill a gap that I think in some ways still exists for women, particularly because I think we need them, because we don't, in my day, we didn't see ourselves in the higher rank. And the women who were in the higher ranks, it was very, very dog eat dog, alpha female. And so if you were going to get promoted or you were going to succeed, you were going to not only have to take on the boys, you're going to have to take on the women too, because it was that. So you had this behavior, and those days we weren't told to be our own unique individual selves and how different we are. And isn't that wonderful? And can't we all coexist? That was not the mantra. That was not the narrative. The narrative was like, I'm going to best you or you're going to best me, but one of us is going in the door and the other one is going to get beat the shit out of. So it was very much, it was it was very alpha, and it was very like you had to act like a guy in order to even get a seat at the table. So there was none of this, at IBM, it was you had to dress a certain way, you had to talk a certain way, I got in trouble for talking to at lunch a guy that was 2 or 3 levels above me because he started a conversation with me. And I literally, my boss and my boss's boss took me aside and asked me what we were talking about. Are you kidding me right now? That this should be the topic of conversation, why you bring me into your office to find out what I said to Paul Kelly? Really? Yes, that is it. Because we want to make sure that you as a junior level woman is not superseding what we have to say to our boss, because everybody was chain of command, chain of command, chain of command, chain of command. You have to wear bow ties. You have to wear navy blue suits. You cannot wear textured stockings. Your shirt should look like this. You cannot talk to these people. Are you okay? I can't operate this way. I can't. So that is no longer the case today. Having said that, I'm not sure that we have enough positive role models. We're never going to have look, there shouldn't be a limit to positive role models in the world. And to what we talked about at some point, you and I can say the same exact thing. Somebody's going to hear it from you differently than the way they hear it from me. And together they will get the message. But we can anticipate that one voice is enough. With social media being such a prevalent way of young people communicating, there is what my friend calls a compare and despair culture. That is not helpful for young women coming up through the ranks. It is not helpful for women trying to build a family, build a business, or build a career, be the best they can be in every aspect of their lives, be fit, be healthy, eat well, all the things that I think are really, really super important in life. You can't be hitting home runs in every aspect of your life at the same time. You can, but not at the same time. And so the book is organized, as I open with voice, I go to time, then I go to, choices, then I go to your job, your internal narrative, your external narrative, your environment, and then implementation. Because honestly, those are the cylinders that need to be firing in order for you to get to the implementation part. And then at that point, okay, now which cylinder do you want to focus on at one time? Because you can't take it all on at one time. You can't, because you'll fail. And this is the problem why people don't act, because they want to eat the elephant in one bite. You got to take it one bite at a time. So rather than say, I got to lose 40 pounds, I got to eat well, I got to be better at my job, I got to leave my job, I got to start a company, I got to raise my kids, I got to do, okay, wait. We're going to get into an apoplectic seizure right now. Let's not do that. Let's figure out what your priorities are and knock things off the list a little at a time. And then I talk about micro moments for that reason, because these little decisions that you make, not buying that house that the bank told you could afford, not buying the second home, not allowing your kids to, be in 15,000 activities so they get burned out and they're, stressed out or whatever. Not allowing that client to make you crazy, saying no to that client because you know that you're going to get an ulcer from them. All these are micro moments, micro decisions. In that moment, you make a choice. Choices lead to action. Action leads to the life that you live. If you want a great life, you have to think about it intentionally. Look behind me, right? So these are my reminders: intentional, grateful, bold. That is my lens that I use every single day to make decisions.
Well, the first thing I will say is I was introduced by a guy I talk about a lot, Ben Ives. He was a character coach of mine, Navy SEAL for 19 years, and he introduced this idea, whether people jive with it or not. It's called work-life harmony, because you hear work-life balance a lot. And to him, work-life balance was work very hard at a job that you may or may not like, and then on Friday just blow off steam by having as much to drink as possible, and then that'll balance out the scales. And to me, it was more resonant because to a high performance lifestyle has alignment. And then taking another idea from a guy named Robin Sharma, who does a podcast called Mastery
Love him.
Sessions. He actually
I love him.
he broke up life into 4 sets, not just mindset, but soul set, health set, and heart set. And heart set being your relationships, health set being your triad of health, your nutrition, your exercise, and your sleep. Your mindset, of course, that's the game that we're playing on this podcast, and what I love to talk about most. And then your soul set. And we talked about that a little bit, about inaction, right? Because a little bit over time, right? And your fire starts to dwindle rather than flourish, right? You bringing up intentional, grateful, and bold really dovetails nicely into a question that I wanted to ask you. When we spoke last, and this is the same for me too, you talked about working with clientele that had like values to you, right? And I felt like you bringing up bold and grateful and intentional. So the question directly would be, what do you look for in your clientele, right? Obviously, those are good standardized words for it, right? But really, what matters most to you when you're sitting down and looking to work with a brand?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is coachability. I don't get much joy, and I'm at the point where I'm fortunate enough to be able to say no, thank you. If you want me to tell you what you want to hear versus what you need, I'm not your person. My agency is not your person. My agency is not your service, my provider, whatever you want to call us. If you are open to hearing what it is that will work based on your problem, based on the pain that you're in, then we can have a conversation. And further, is this somebody personally that I'm going to be working with that I would enjoy having a conversation outside of what they're asking me to do? If I can't see myself having a glass of wine or a cocktail or a coffee with this person, probably not a fit. So there's one is coachability. Two is, would I be able to have that conversation outside of work with this person? And it boils down to this, I think. I just realized this in my head. Both things, professional and personal, have what I call intellectual curiosity. If you don't show up with some level of intellectual curiosity, meaning I know it, I know it already, I don't need to learn anything new, I've made up my mind, I can't change my mind, everything is static, everything is preordained, predetermined, whatever, and nothing you're going to say is going to alter my reality, and blah, 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 blah. In other words, you're stuck in your ways. I have no intellectual curiosity. I don't like to travel. I don't like to do. I don't like to experience. I don't want to see. There's no joy in Mudville. It's just like, why would I do that intentionally? No, I want to be around people that are like, this is great. Where are you going? Where are your next trip you're planning? What are you experiencing? What books have you read? Like what works for you? Like you, right? I could talk to you for hours. Okay, great. If I could have mini subsets of Mark Glissini's all over my life would be perfect.
Thank you for saying that. And I couldn't agree more. I'm going to use one of the best women that I've come across. She was my managing director at BGC Partners when I was on Wall Street. Learned a lot from her. And one of the things that I learned that resonated with me, and still I use to this day, is that if you're going to do business with somebody, they like, execute, and trust. They have to have those three things. Right? Do I like them? That's the glass of wine that you were talking about. Can they execute? Right? Because I can like them, but if they don't execute, am I going to do work with them? It's like, we'll be friends or something like that. But then, and then the trust factor is long-term work with that person, right? So I mean, it really made it something. We talked about at the top of the hour. That kind of simplicity, it's like really makes it easier. And I would just say that's intellectual curiosity with a little bit of trust thrown in there.
Totally.
Right?
I'm a big trust person. I love trust is big for me. Like if I don't feel that I can trust you, it's not going to work out so well.
It takes years to build, seconds to break. That's something that I learned many years ago.
Oh my God, it's so true.
I don't know how I want to go about this next question, but I guess I will ask it this way. Is there a part of your book that you're writing that means most to you? Right? That chapter or that part of it, right? Choice.
Yeah. Choice, because so in everything, underlying everything, whether it's internal narrative, you can choose your internal narrative, your external narrative, you choose that. You choose your job or your career, you choose it. I mean, I know people think they're stuck with it, but they're not. Your voice, you choose that. You choose your story. You have agency in everything that you say and do. Whether or not something is like the old adage, you've heard it a million times. You can't control what people do to you, but you can control your response to it. Yes, you can. Choice is in everything. I talk about micro moments. This is so true. Micro moment number one, am I going to believe that the reason that woman made a face in that meeting when I was presenting was that she hates me and my ideas? I have choice in the matter. She could have gas from Mexican food. I don't know, at lunch. Like, she could have had a bad meal. She could have had nothing against Mexican food, please. Let's just leave that alone. Cut that out. But literally, like, maybe, maybe it didn't sit well with her. Maybe she had like spicy chili. I don't know. But you chose to make it mean that she doesn't like you or your ideas. That's a choice. And then that impacts everything else about your relationship with this person. You choose everything. You choose your spouse, you choose what you put in your mouth, you choose what you're going to say to your kids, you choose what you're not going to do that day. It's all about choice at the end of the day.
I agree with you. And something that when I was preparing for this, I saw, and course correct me if it's not true right away, and I know you will. There was somewhere that I read that when it came to marketing, it found you rather than vice versa. Is that true?
Yeah. That's very perceptive of you. Yeah. So I think the reason I say that that marketing found me and I didn't find it is because I've been communicating and telling stories for people and now companies that couldn't tell it for themselves. And it started when I was 5, when I communicated for my parents and my family. And that was me telling their story or me communicating on their behalf. And I feel like I entered into this business, this space, almost through the back door, almost by accident, because I was destined to be telling stories and simplifying stories and doing all of the things that I have done second nature since I'm little, completely by accident or maybe by intention, because the universe has decided that this is what I should be doing.
There's a book called Genius by Hans Isaac that it talks about the natural history of creativity. And what's so remarkable about it was the top 2 factors that go into creativity were intelligence, G, or how, where you are on the standard distribution of intelligence. And the second one, which is just so remarkable, is early childhood trauma. And why? It's because when you're going through trauma as a young one, you have to problem solve whether you like to or not. And that opens a part of you that problem solves for the rest of your life. And I find that really fascinating, right? So you find this part of your story that's just part of you, that from 5 years old coming to America and dealing with the discrimination all the way through many of your early chapters, right? Which let's be honest, there's a lot to be grateful for there too, because you have this edge and this chip, right? That has never left you. And that's a question I could ask you. When did you integrate that? You said it was right around 40 that you were able to integrate that edge or the black belt? Is that really when it really happened?
Yeah, I think so. I figured out. So my dad passed, I was 42. So he only saw, I just started training, and I think, he sees us from above. I always say he saw it from above, but I think he realized that he tried to prepare me for what eventually did happen here, because, my dad would teach me how to defend myself, taught me how to box, right? So low key stuff, because he knew that kids were mean and so on and so forth. But by the time I decided I wanted to do this mixed martial arts karate thing, and my kids did it too, which for 2 different reasons was super, super beneficial to them as well as humans. My son got, some clarity around focus and discipline and rigor. And my daughter got tougher. She was very much, she was sweet. She was always very sweet and very introverted, and at the same, and a ballerina. So she literally she went all the way up to black belt, mixed martial arts black belt. She was a tough little one. And she was the ballerina on the other hand. So the 2 coexisting in one human was just so wonderful to behold. But I think that whole journey for us as a family allowed me to let go of that chip. And and that's when I think it just was like, okay, we're done with that era. We can go on to something else. And you have more, you have bigger fish to fry now, and let's move on. And you have contribution. So rather than get muddied up in the there was never a woe is me though, I don't have that so much. I'm just like, use it and move on. And, people have, oh, please, what I went through relative to what could have been other people, like there's trauma in the world, real serious, horrible trauma and abuse and all of that. And I'm grateful that that didn't happen to me or around me. So I don't view it like that, but I think to your point, it gave me, look, you have a choice. I talk about this in the book. I had a choice. I could have stayed down and been like, oh my God, the class bully just punched me. Why is a boy taking on me? I could have done that. And then I self-identify for the rest of my life as a victim. Everything the lens that gets created in that moment was that of, I'm in charge now. I got this. I have agency in my reaction. My reaction was, you're not going to ever do that to me again, or you will get me punching you back. That's a choice. The choice in that moment was stay on the floor, have people feel bad for you, have the teacher pick you up. Everyone's like, oh, poor thing, they hit a girl. Okay, all that. Or get up, beat the shit out of the class bully. And by the way, he never picked on me or my friend again. That's it. Now, he picked on my friend because she lived in a trailer park. Like, I was friends with whatever. Doesn't matter to me what your life circumstance was. But the fact that you were brought up to think it's okay to pick on somebody because of where they live, you've got bigger problems. So go, be.
I'm going to ask you to add to it because life is opportunities, choices, consequences. You talked about whether that's taming or maturation or keeping the edge, but harnessing it, right?
Yeah.
What would you say is the same versus different about Monique younger versus now?
So the gut reaction, if somebody's in my face today, is really, 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 really hard for me to not react, right? So because I have a trigger response, I'm like, right. So there's that, right? And it's funny because a client who knew me a couple of years ago, he goes, when I see you drop your head and have that gaze, I can see you on the mat. Like he just was just, got a little vision of what that could look like. Because again, I didn't have time to play sport, and I would have loved to have played sport because I can't sit still. Like, I'm a gym rat, and I'm always working out, and I'm always doing stuff, and I played tennis, and I did this and I did that. I swam, but I was never really encouraged to play a sport, which I think would have been an amazing way to channel some of this, right? And I didn't have team, so I learned team sort of being married to my husband, and then having my son, who was all about team because he was in baseball, very competitive baseball and soccer. And so I learned team from him and watching the dynamics of how that helps you grow up and channel certain things. I didn't have the benefit of that. So I think, to answer your question, the Monique of today is much more appreciative and much more empathetic and much more tuned into those who are not feeling part of for any reason. And my immediate reaction is to come to their rescue, because that's what mama bears do. Because at the end of the day, I'm a bit of a mama bear, right? So if you were in distress, oh my God, I'm going to move a mountain to make sure that you're okay. And even if you don't have to be my cubby bear, you could be like a friend or a family or a loved one that I have adopted as a cubby. And if somebody messes with you, it's not good for them. It's not good. I'll take care of it.
Right.
Don't mess. Don't mess with my mark. You know what I mean? It's
100%. And I love that response about appreciation. And one of the things that I've come to understand as I've gotten deeper and deeper into psychology is one of the best compliments that you can be called is evolved. And it really means an introvert that worked on their extroversion using predictive index, a lone wolf who's worked to become a collaborator, organized person becoming more spontaneous, vice versa. I can go on and on and on. And I love that you have that initial reaction when provoked, yet there's now that maybe it's self-talk, right? And that really will bring us into what I can't wait to talk about, is the internal narrative and external narrative. To me, knowing what I know about belief system and how much belief system drives actions, could you talk a little bit about those chapters of internal narrative and external narrative?
Sure. Yeah. They're one of my favorites because I think people really do believe that they're stuck with their narrative, the one that they've had since pick an age, 5, 10, 15, 20. If I was stuck with that narrative, life would be a lot less enjoyable than it is today. So the one thing I want to leave people with is you are never stuck with anything. You have choice and agency in everything. You have choice and agency in your internal narrative. You have choice and agency in your external narrative. You have choice. And if you don't like it, it doesn't serve you, change it. You can change it in real time. So for me, the thing about internal and external is that people in general, in this compare and despair culture that we are living in today, it is far easier to take on, adopt, get stuck with anything. Somebody says you're too fill in the blanks, too skinny, too fat, too old, too young, too rich, too poor, it can go any way you want it, or that you are a certain way. And you take that on, and if that becomes your reality. No, whatever you declare becomes your reality. You declare it, it becomes your reality. And then if you read books by like Dr. Joe Dispenza, he's like, breaking your mind. I forget, I can look it up. I'm in my house somewhere. Dr. Joe Dispenza wrote a book, and the name of the book is Changing. Yeah, hold on, I'll get it in a second. It's annoying when I can't find something, and I just I'll get it in a second. Breaking the habit of being yourself, how to lose your mind and create a new one. Okay. So Joe Dispenza, he talks about, your mind is everything. It can create such incredible power, can, propel you to the highest peaks of performance and your life, or it can throw into the depths of despair. You decide, you choose. And so the external, now, like a couple of examples of women that I interviewed in the book, they had it kind of imposed on them that they weren't enough because they weren't matching what the expectations of their family and their culture threw upon them. Others didn't have role models and people to look up to, as many of us did not. So they created, a reality for themselves that was limiting. And until they had the ability to self-educate and, pivot from that perspective, they were stuck with these narratives. I did a lot of training, a lot of reading, a lot like you. I mean, I'm a lifelong learner. I love to learn. The only difference is between you and I, well, not the only, the many differences, but the common thread is that you've remembered titles and names and themes, and I have trouble remembering all the books that I've read. I'm like, why? How does he just pull that out? How does he do that? I marvel at that. I think that's amazing. I don't have that skill. I don't know if I ever had it, but anyway. So the idea
there's many
of being
things
stuck.
you could do that there's many things that I feel the same way about you. So keep going, please.
Thank you. So hopefully that answers the question a little bit about internal and external.
Definitely. And I just want, because I gave people a taste of it, about the catalyst, and I was thinking about it because you said it several times. I said that the number 2 barrier as to why people don't catalyze their life was inaction is costly. So you have to look at your life 3 or 5 years from now. What if it's still the same? How bad would that be? Right. And then you brought it up several times, is the number 1 barrier is agency. People don't feel like they have agency. And Jonah Berger talks about that. And just to give 3, 4, and 5, because I think that it really helps people get to action. Number 3 was take smaller steps to get there. Don't feel like you have to jump the chasm, really just take incremental steps. That's why I was so moved by the part of your story where you said, I just left, right? I had the flexibility to, right, that delineation you made between want to spend versus make, and being able to have leverage to leave. Life is really a lot about leverage. So taking small steps to say, I'm going to go this way. And the last 2 were lowering barriers to trial. So like, if I want to get more into the marketing field, like I need to know an ally. Oh, wait, I know Monique. Let me lower the barrier and understand a little bit more. And then the last one, which I absolutely love and I find hysterical, is higher concentration or corroborating evidence. If one person tells you you have a tail, you laugh. If 3 people tell you have a tail, you turn around and check. And I think the point I want to make on that one is that as you, and and you probably could attest to this because you've gotten to such great heights in your field. As you get higher and higher and higher, there's less people that are going to give you authentic, truthful feedback. And I think finding and always looking for your dogma to be smashed, like stop with the affirmation and confirmation bias and say, you know, what do I not know, right? Have more humility inside of that and learn. I wanted to share that inside as you were talking about the internal external narrative, because a word that kept coming up was agency. And I want more people that are listening to us to know that they can do something about it. And something that I find that makes you superwoman more than anything else is the amount of hats that you wear, right? You're a devoted mother. You're doing all the things on the career front. You're now leading and mentoring people. Time is a chapter inside your book. And I just want to throw out an idea that I learned recently and I thought was fascinating. So you can tell me what you think about it. But it was a guy, Dr. Jason Selk was a mental coach, and I was studying it. And he said, time maximization because you can't manage time. And I said, what do you mean by that? And I'm listening. And what he said is, there it goes, another second, another second, another second. Are you holding it? Are you managing it? You can't do anything. All you can do is maximize it, right? So my question to you is, how do you do it? You know, how do you make the most of your time? How do you maximize time and get all the things that you're working on done?
Yeah, so I definitely am a time I have an enormous amount of respect and deference on time because I know I can't get it back. So I have that going the same way that the gentleman that you just quoted has. So the respect and deference is that, all that matters is the now. All that matters is the now. And that's something I learned, in the landmark training that we did, that my family and I did. And it makes sense to me. So I use time blocking like nobody's business. I time block everything. I time block my workouts and my exercise routine. I time block my existing work. See, this is where people get screwed up. They time block for meetings with others. They don't time block for commitments to themselves. And that is the big, big, big difference. I time block everything. I time block from the moment that if I go get my haircut, it's on my calendar in a different color than it is if I'm doing client work. And the blocking has to include the work that you are actually getting paid to deliver for yourself or your obligations. So people will say, oh, I have a meeting from 1 to 3 and I have cocktails with this one at 5 to 6. So I have these couple of hours in the afternoon open. No, you don't. You have 3 projects due by tomorrow. If you don't time block those projects, they're not going to get done, and they're not even in your cognitive space, and you're going to forget about them, or you're going to someday this week have a thermonuclear breakdown because you're overloaded because you didn't time block properly. So every day I look at my calendar. Every week I look at my day every day. I start my day with my calendar. I end my day with my calendar. Where did I complete? What did I not complete? What needs to be moved to the next day, to the next week, to somebody else? What needs to be managed? And what are my priorities? If I see too much of a certain color on a week or not enough, I look for fitness and joy. For me, those two things, and I literally have them in different colors. So family and friends, like social gatherings, whatever, is in a color, and fitness and workouts is in a different color. If I don't see those two colors, which happen to be green and red, so they're very, very obvious. If I don't see those two colors showing up every day, I got imbalances in my calendar. I wanted to address that right off the bat. Like if I'm not working out or giving myself joy with something that I'm doing every single day, I'm out of balance. I'm out of whatever. And so rectify that post haste.
That's a masterclass for anybody who's a little bit disorganized. I mean, commitments to self over meetings with others, fitness and joy, and color coding. One of the things that I really admire about you, Monique, is you live it, right? Your actions speak so loudly. I can't hear a word you're saying. Ralph Waldo Emerson. You travel, right, throughout the year, right? You not only plan your day and your week, you travel. So you're living this, right? You're finding ways to have respect for your time so that you are ever evolving, right? Like I said in the introduction. I didn't have this plan, but I want to ask you now, how has that travel made you better at what you do?
Oh, gosh, that's so good. It's made me a better person. I don't know if it's better at what I do, but we were fortunate enough to spend 6 weeks working from Paris, France this year. That was a conscious decision. So Steve and I decided that we were not going to buy, a cute little retreat out for weekends or a getaway or a second home or whatever we want to call it. we decided that we were going to push that off for a couple of years and just travel as much as our bodies and minds and business will allow. And working, full-time working. I mean, I didn't take much time fully, unplugged, if you will, but it was totally manageable. We worked from Paris for 6 weeks. It's my birthplace, obviously. It's a place where I feel very emotionally connected to, but more than that is we learned the cadence and the lifestyle of living like a local. This is our intellectual curiosity. This is what we want to be doing every year, going to a different place and immersing ourselves in the culture and the people and the living and the life, and becoming a greater citizen of the world, becoming more interesting, becoming more engaged. We talk to people, we talk to waitresses and restaurant owners and gallery owners, and we got into conversations with so many interesting people and learned so much. If you don't open your mouth and you don't engage in community, you are so missing the richness of life. You are so missing so many things. Like, just listen, ask somebody a question, and then be a generous listener.
Well, I'll bring even the biology and neuroscience into it, because you're saying you're missing. The neuroscience is pretty clear that dormant genes turn on inside you by putting yourself in certain situations, right? So this is not, and then that could be extended to another level with Stephen Kotler's work on flow and how you constantly have to put yourself in new environments to go to another level. And that's why I really asked you the question. I love the living like a local. When I read the title of your book, right, the 7 secrets to creating a life you love. Wow, amazing. And then a practical guide for women in leadership. I can't wait to read it. And I know that that's not directly a guide for me, but I can't wait to read it. So my question to you is, in mental performance, I like working with good and taking them great to excellent, to a place that they've never been, right? Using mind and behavior and studying themselves. And if I know you could say everybody, right? But if I had to ask you, who is this really for, right? Who are you targeting it towards?
Funny you should say that, because my 2 biggest fans, or 2 of my biggest fans, were men actually in this process. And they were they weren't upset. They were like, do you really have to call it a guide for women? Do you really? Because it's good for everybody. I was like, dudes, we got to pick our avatars. But reality, I'll tell you who it's for. I think it's for somebody who might be having and I don't necessarily, it's more applicable to women, just simply the only reason is because there's more hats that they have to wear, and historically they haven't been served by mentors historically. So that's the only reason I really took it more to women. And in my experience, growing up through it and evolving throughout it in leadership, I found a lack of this kind of stage advice, breaking it down, making it more simple, more accessible, more implementable. I get very frustrated with people who give you pie in the sky stuff and that you can't bring down to the everyday. Like, what am I going to do with this? That's great. I read your book. I read your whatever. I read your blog. That sounds really good. But you know what? It's sort of like that professor at school. In my world, in business, when you have a professor that's been in 30 years in academia versus a guy that's been in the private sector for however many years, you're going to learn more for the guy that's in the trenches, not the guy that's been talking about the war. You're not going to learn from the philosopher in business. You're going to learn about the practitioner. Now, in philosophy, that's a different thing. But so for me, this book is for the person who wants to implement something, anything that's going to make them show up better at the end of the day, for themselves, for their families, for everything, right? So for their ecosystem of how they show up. But more importantly, once you get grounded in your possibility, and I don't mean to be, funny about this, but possibilities everywhere, you just have to see it. And the only way you're going to see it is if you are in action. And so what are these action steps? What are those compartments, those life areas that are easy to break down, simplify, get a handle on, and then implement? And that's what I think I've done. I've looked at it as 7 areas of fully digested hacks that it may have taken me 40 years to develop. But once you read the book, you're like, oh, well, maybe it's a lot more accessible to me than I thought.
One of the one-liners in sports psychology that really is catchy is thoughts determine what you want, actions determine what you get. It's like what a really big thing of when, goals are just a wish list unless you have an action plan. And I really believe in that. And I know that to be true. I really love how you said the implementation and show up for yourself. It's amazing when I'm working through relationships with a client, and this has like happened dozens of times, and I'm not overstating it, is I'll say, who's the most important relationship in your life? And they usually say, the first one is usually God or a romantic partner. And I say, oh, who's after that? And they say, oh, my family, this sibling or this parent. I go, oh, great. Who's after that? And they say, my best friend at work or otherwise. And I go, okay, all right, let's start over here. It's got to be you. It's got to be you. And I think that's the hardest thing is I'll use a term. It's called the Solomon paradox, which means we're much better at giving advice to another person than listening to that exact advice ourselves. And there's so many things that we would do for our dog or our pet or our friend that we would never do for ourselves. And that's what I'm hoping. I can't wait to read your book, but I'm hoping that people get from your book is that they come to increase the self-respect and self-love. Is there anything you want to say before I ask you another question?
If I'd like to put a finer point on that, if I may. Two things. One is I used to tell my kids, you can't love somebody else fully until you love yourself first. So I used to always raise them with that concept, and hopefully that's been ingrained in their heads. And the other thing is you have to keep promises to yourself the same way you keep promises to other people. Without that integrity, you feel less than. If I say to myself the night before, I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning early and I'm going to go to the gym and work out, and the alarm goes off and I roll over and I click snooze 4 times and I don't get out of bed and I barely make it to work on time and I haven't gone to the gym and blah, 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 and on and on and on and on. I'm disappointed in myself. That's not a good place to be. You have to be there with your word and your actions. And the other thing is that's very aligned with what you just said is you cannot speak to yourself. The way you speak to yourself has to be the way that you would speak to a best friend, because a lot of people will prioritize their best friend over themselves. And that's a problem right then and there. You have to love yourself first. You have to be, comfortable in your own skin. And that is something to strive for. It doesn't come early. It doesn't come, to everybody at the same time. It will take years and years and years of self-work, but in this process, you have to remember that 80% of the human thoughts are negative, and most of them are negative thoughts about and to yourself. So you need to put a cork in that sucker before it overtakes you. Okay. So the point about this whole narrative thing is you can't talk to yourself like a piece of shit. You have to have respect and love for yourself, because it's going to show up in some way, shape, or form. So talk to yourself like a BFF is one of the chapters in the book. And that's important. So those promises that you make to your friend, I'm going to be there at 7:00. Well, if you have said to yourself, I'm going to be at the gym at 7:00, you better show up. You made a promise to yourself. You're the same thing as a BFF. Start acting like it. That's it. And on that note,
I'll wrap up here and with 2 more questions. Is that okay?
Yeah. Be the longest podcast in history. They'll be like, tune this shit out. No, I'm kidding.
Definitely not. My favorite in psychology, and many people close to me know this, is Carl Jung's idea of what you want most lies where you least want to look. And for many people, that's the mirror. For many people, that's the self work, right? That's why I care so much about the internal narrative that you talked about. Shout out to my friend Anka Tezjan for giving me a definition of integrity. Like you talked about promises to yourself. He said, honesty is conforming your words to the world, and integrity is conforming your world to your words. And I really like that. The integrity of conforming your own world, like going to do that workout, eating the right food, etc. I want to finish with quick hitters and then a last thing to finish up. And that would be, because I want people to know, not just know the promoter of the book and who wrote it, but I want them to know you as a BFF maybe. And that would be, what's one of your favorite movies or books that you would recommend to people?
Oh, wow. You hit me. That one hit me by surprise. Books or movies. Oh my God. I'm going to think of all these things probably after we get off the podcast. I have so many books that I love.
Well, let me ask you this then. Whoever wants to reach out to you, where should they go? That's a perfect way.
Well, definitely LinkedIn. I think that's the easiest way to find me is Monique de Maio. It's DEMAIO. And on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, and I'm on Facebook. And it depends on what the inquiry is like, but I think I'm fairly findable. The name that gave me so much pain when I was younger is now easy for me because there's not a lot of Monique de Maio out there. I think the happiness, to answer your previous question, The Happiness Advantage by Sean Achor, I don't remember how he pronounces his last name, and Atomic Habits by James Clear are two of of my favorites for different reasons. Those are sort of practical books. I love Flux, The 8 Superpowers for Thriving in Constant Change by April Rennie. She's one of my favorite humans on the planet. And she talks about the fluidity and being able to go with the flow and things like that, that are really, really important specifically in today's world. And then for a fiction book it's kind of cool is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, because that book talks about like making micro decisions and what that would do that changes the protagonist's life in a different way. So if she had done this, then this would have happened. So if it was more of an if this, then that kind of scenario, which I love to play with because it goes back to agency, choice, and intention. So again, Happiness Advantage, Sean Achor, Atomic Habits, James Clear, Flux, 8 Superpowers for Thriving in Constant Change for April Rennie, and The Midnight Library by Matt Haig for fiction. So those are my wrap-ups. I just had to think about them for a second. Yeah.
Perfect. 2 final questions then. You wrote this book about leadership, a practical guide to it, and what I would ask you is a misconception in leadership that people are following right now. What is something that people believe is leadership, true leadership, and you would say, no.
Yeah. So I think it's the say, don't do. It's like, do what I say, don't do what I do. I think there's an awful lot of hypocrisy in leadership because I think that people are it's easy to buy a leadership or a mission, vision, values program and implement it in your, put sign outs on your conference table or your conference room walls. But are you really living it? Are you walking the talk? Are you doing it? Are you actually doing the work? Like, is the CEO really implementing those kinds of behavior changes that he wants everybody underneath him to? So that to me that's a big thing. I still think there's a lot of hypocrisy in leadership. I just think, if you do the right thing at every point in time, even when somebody's not looking, that integrity will lead you far and your organization's going to grow and do the right thing and it's going to attract the right people and really good things are going to happen. At the end of the day, if you're an asshole, it's going to get out. And no matter how much beautiful window dressing you have and putting lipstick on a pig, that's going to come out too.
Integrity. And that the last thread would be building on the leadership. I asked everybody the definition of greatness to them, right? You've been around great brands, you've been around great people, and you've been doing the work and studying it and creating this book. How do you define greatness and how do we know when we see it?
I think you know it when you feel it. I don't think you have to see it. I think you experience it. It's an energy that you get from somebody. When you walk into a room, you will immediately find the leaders in that room. They will find you, you will find them. By the aura, the energy that somebody has in how they show up. You can see it.
Well, like I said at the top of the hour, and I guess a little way beyond an hour, thank you so much for your energy, your conviction. It's evident in this, and thank you for being a leader. The 7 Secrets to Creating a Life You Love, coming out later this year, right?
Yeah,
When
September.
specifically?
Yay! Woo!
September. Outstanding. Monique, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Awesome.